The castle loomed on the edge of the forest like a dark crown against the sky. Its tall spires pierced the clouds, and shadows stretched along its cold stone walls as the sun sank beneath the horizon. No birds sang here. No breeze whispered through the halls. Only silence filled the corridors, broken sometimes by the faint echo of footsteps long gone or the distant clinking of chains that no one could see. Inside, the Vampire King moved through the castle alone. His black cloak swept the floor, and his pale hands brushed against the cold stone walls as he walked. He had ruled for centuries, a king of darkness, feared by humans and immortals alike. He had seen kingdoms rise and fall, witnessed love bloom and die, and learned that even power could not protect him from loss. Love, he thought bitterly, was a dangerous thing, one that left scars deeper than any sword. It was Valentine's Day, a day humans celebrated with roses, candles, and laughter. The Vampire King had long stopped caring about such things. He did not want company. He did not want reminders of the warmth he had lost. His castle had no mirrors, for he did not need to see his reflection to remember his own sorrow. The only companion he allowed was the silence of centuries. Yet that silence was about to be broken. Far below the castle, in the small village that clung to the edge of the forest, a little girl named Aurora skipped through the streets, a basket of treats in her small hands. She had curly golden hair that bounced with every step, and eyes bright with curiosity and courage. While other children played with dolls or ran about with friends, Aurora had a different idea. She wanted to invite the Vampire King to dinner. "Why him?" her friend asked, tilting her head. "Because he's alone," Aurora said simply. "And lonely people need friends too." Her words were pure and sincere, and she did not understand the danger. To her, the Vampire King was just a sad, lonely man who needed someone to care. To the villagers, he was a monster. But Aurora did not care about stories of fear. She only cared about kindness. The journey to the castle was not easy. The forest was dark, and shadows seemed to move in the corners of her eyes. Owls hooted, and leaves rustled as though whispering warnings. But Aurora walked on, her small feet steady, her heart full of hope. She climbed the rocky path that led to the castle gates and reached out with trembling hands to knock. The gates creaked open slowly, almost as if the castle itself was curious about this small human daring to enter. Aurora stepped inside, her eyes wide at the enormous hall that stretched above her. Candles flickered in sconces along the walls, their light dancing over carved stone figures of kings, queens, and warriors. She set her basket on the floor and took a deep breath. "Do you want to have dinner with us?" she asked, her voice soft but clear. She did not say please in the way adults taught her. It seemed unnecessary here. Her words carried a kind of honesty that even the walls could feel. From the shadows, a figure emerged. The Vampire King. His skin was pale like moonlight, and his eyes glimmered red like rubies catching fire. He was taller than any man she had ever seen, his presence commanding and terrifying all at once. His lips were thin and serious, yet the moment they opened, there was curiosity, something he had not felt in centuries. "You want to eat with me?" His voice was low, like the echo of an empty hall. Aurora nodded. "Yes. My family is small, and I thought maybe you don't have anyone to celebrate Valentine's Day with, so I wanted to share with you." The king studied her for a long moment. The weight of centuries pressed on him, the ghosts of past loves and betrayals swirling in the air. He should have told her no. He should have sent her away, but something about her courage, her innocence, tugged at a part of his heart that had been frozen for hundreds of years. Finally, he inclined his head. "Very well," he said. "Come in." Aurora's face lit up like the first rays of sunlight after a long winter. She followed him through the great hall, her small hands clutching the basket as they walked past grand statues and towering portraits. The air smelled faintly of roses, old stone, and something indefinable, a memory of love long gone, perhaps, or the quiet sorrow of the immortal. The dining room was enormous, its long table polished to a shine, its silverware arranged with care. Candles flickered, casting shadows that danced along the walls. The king gestured to a chair at the far end, and Aurora climbed onto it, her legs swinging slightly as she looked at him with wide, trusting eyes. "I brought treats," she said. "Cookies, some fruit, and chocolate. I hope you like chocolate." The king looked at the basket. Chocolate had been meaningless to him for centuries. Sweet things were trivial, fleeting, human. But he found himself curious. Perhaps it was the idea that someone had thought of him, that someone had crossed the danger of the forest just to share kindness. Perhaps it was the light in her eyes, bright and fearless, that drew him in. "I will try some," he said. And for the first time in many years, he felt something that resembled anticipation. As they ate, Aurora chattered about simple things, her favorite games, the flowers she wanted to plant, the stories she had read about knights and dragons. The king listened, mostly silent, but he was learning again what it meant to hear a voice unburdened by grief. Her laughter, light and musical, was like sunlight in the castle's dark halls. After a while, Aurora tilted her head. "Why are you always alone?" she asked softly, curious, unafraid. "Are you sad?" The king looked away, the shadows of memory flickering in his eyes. "I have seen much in my life. Love, loss, betrayal. It is easier to be alone than to let others suffer because of me." Aurora frowned. "But isn't it lonely? Don't you want a friend?" "I thought I did not." His voice was quiet, almost lost in the room's vastness. "But perhaps I am wrong." Aurora smiled. "Then maybe you need someone brave enough to remind you what it feels like to care." The king felt a strange stir in his chest, something he had not felt in centuries. Longing, fragile and trembling, like a candle in the wind. It was dangerous, this warmth that dared to enter his frozen heart. Yet he could not deny it. Suddenly the castle itself seemed to respond. A cold draft swept the room, though no windows were open. Candles flickered violently. Shadows along the walls shifted, curling and stretching like living things. The king tensed. He knew the signs. An ancient curse, older than his own crown, was stirring. It had slept quietly for decades, waiting for moments of emotional upheaval. And tonight, perhaps, it had sensed something new. Life, warmth, courage. Aurora did not notice the movement. She was too busy telling the king about the rose she had pressed between the pages of her favorite book and how she hoped it would bloom again someday. The king exhaled slowly, trying to calm himself. He had faced armies, assassins, and centuries of darkness, yet he had never faced this, the innocence and light of a small human girl, daring to touch his heart. Then a soft scratching came from the doorway. Something dark and faintly luminous shifted in the shadow. The king's hand moved subtly to the edge of the table, a protective gesture he had not made in centuries. He knew the curse had awakened, drawn to Aurora's courage and his own long-suppressed emotion. "Do not worry," he said softly to her, masking the tension in his voice. "Everything is as it should be." Aurora nodded, trusting him without question. She had no fear, only a sense that this tall, pale man, this vampire king, was capable of kindness as well as strength. The rest of the evening passed with small stories, laughter, and shared silences. The king found himself teaching Aurora a few old words from languages long dead, watching her repeat them with delight. Her presence was like a light breaking through centuries of shadow, and though he would never admit it aloud, he felt something he had not felt since his earliest years of mortality: hope. Yet as the night deepened, The castle itself seemed to grow uneasy. The shadows lengthened, pooling in corners and twisting along the walls. Somewhere deep in the heart of the stone halls, the curse stirred fully, sensing the stirrings of love, trust, and joy, things it could never touch without warning. Aurora yawned and stretched her small arms. "I think I should go home now," she said. "My mom will worry." The king nodded, standing taller than her chair. "I will escort you," he said, and his voice carried a strange warmth, almost forgotten. As they walked back through the great hall, the shadows twisted and whispered, echoing from long ago. The vampire king felt their presence at the edge of his awareness. Something ancient, something tied to his own heart, had been awakened tonight. Aurora paused at the castle gates and looked up at him. "Thank you for dinner," she said simply. "It was really nice. Maybe we can do it again?" The king knelt slightly to meet her gaze. "Perhaps," he said, his voice soft but steady. "Perhaps we will." She smiled, then skipped down the path toward the village, her basket swinging lightly. The king watched her go, his chest feeling both heavy and light, as though centuries of darkness had lifted, if only for a moment. Then, from the deepest corner of the hall, a whisper echoed. A cold, ancient voice, full of longing and fury. "You dared to feel again, my king. Now face what you have awakened." The king stiffened. Centuries of fear and sorrow returned in a heartbeat. He realized that the night was far from over. The little girl had unknowingly brought light to his world, but she had also awakened something that could threaten them both. He closed the gates with a heavy hand, the echo of the lock sounding like a distant drum. The castle was silent once more, but the darkness within was no longer dormant, and for the first time in centuries, the vampire king did not feel alone, but he also did not feel safe. The night was just beginning. The next evening, the vampire king could not shake the memory of the little girl. Aurora's laughter, her fearless eyes, and the warmth that had crept into his cold heart haunted him in the quiet halls of his castle. For the first time in centuries, he felt a pull toward something outside himself, something human, fragile, yet astonishingly strong. Yet the castle was restless. Shadows flickered along the walls, curling and writhing like living creatures. The air carried a chill, and the faint scent of roses seemed tinged with smoke. The ancient curse, long dormant, had awakened the previous night. It slumbered no longer, drawn to the stirring of the king's heart, and the light Aurora had brought. Still, the king could not ignore her invitation. When he arrived at the village, Aurora ran toward him, her golden curls bouncing, her small hands clutching the basket once more. "I brought more treats," she said, smiling, "and I asked my mom if it's okay. She said I can stay a little longer." The king's dark eyes softened. "You are bold," he said. "Few humans would walk into this castle twice." "I'm not afraid," Aurora said simply. "I like brave things, and I like kind things." He could only nod, intrigued by her fearless honesty. For a moment, centuries of solitude, sorrow, and distrust seemed to fade in the warmth of her presence. As they crossed the forest path, the castle seemed to awaken behind them. The wind carried whispers that the king recognized, voices that had haunted him in dreams, warnings, fragments of sorrow, echoes of vengeance. But tonight, he ignored them. Tonight, he would see what light felt like again. When they entered the castle, the dining hall was transformed. Candles flickered in tall golden sconces, and the moonlight spilled through stained glass windows, painting the walls with colors of ruby, sapphire, and emerald. Shadows still lingered, twisting unnaturally, yet the room felt alive in a way it had not been for centuries. Aurora placed her basket on the table and began unpacking treats: chocolate, fruit, small cakes dusted with powdered sugar. I thought we could try them all, she said, and maybe talk about stories too. The king settled into his chair, observing her quietly. Her hands moved deftly, her eyes bright, her smile warm. He felt something fragile bloom within him, a longing he had thought lost forever. You are small but fearless, he said softly. Few humans would dare to bring treats to a vampire king. Aurora giggled. Maybe most humans are too scared, but I don't like fear. Fear makes people miss what is good. The king considered her words, and for the first time in centuries, he wondered what he had missed. Perhaps he had been too afraid to feel, too afraid to trust. Perhaps the darkness he embraced was not protection, but a prison of his own making. As they ate, Aurora chattered about her favorite stories: knights who fought for honor, queens who ruled wisely, dragons who guarded treasures, and spirits who taught lessons to the living. The king listened, fascinated by her imagination. She spoke of things he had read long ago in books that had gathered dust, yet hearing them from her lips made the stories come alive. You believe in magic, don't you? Aurora asked, pausing and tilting her head. I did once, the king admitted. Long ago, I believed that love and courage could change the world, but I have seen how quickly those things can be destroyed. Aurora frowned. But don't you think that's why we must keep trying? Even if we fail, it's better than never trying at all. The words struck him more than she could know. He felt centuries of regret pressing down on him, mistakes, betrayals, lost love, and yet her words were simple, pure, and hopeful. For the first time, he wondered if he could try again. But the shadows in the hall had not forgotten. They whispered, curling around the edges of the candlelight. The curse had stirred fully now, sensing the king's openness, his fragile vulnerability, and the courage of the small human who dared to touch his heart. A gust of cold wind swept through the hall, rattling the candles. Aurora shivered, glancing at the king. Are you cold? He asked, his voice gentler than he intended. A little, she said. But I'm okay. You're here, so I feel safe. The king's hand twitched near the edge of the table. Something dark and powerful lurked in the corners, something born from centuries of sorrow and rage. It had been bound to the castle for centuries, waiting for the king's heart to weaken, for his walls to fall. Now, drawn by warmth and courage, it moved closer. Aurora, unaware of the lurking danger, reached for a small cake and offered it to him. Try this one. It's chocolate and raspberry. I think you'll like it. The king took the treat, hesitating. He had long thought of sweets as meaningless, trivial human pleasures. Yet he found himself curious, almost delighted. He took a bite, and the flavor, rich, sweet, familiar, brought a strange comfort he had not felt in centuries. Aurora's smile, radiant and fearless, warmed something deep within him. You enjoy it, she said, tilting her head. I did, he admitted, almost reluctantly. It is pleasant. Her laughter rang through the hall, bright and musical, filling the space with light. Shadows recoiled slightly, as if even they were startled by her innocence. After a moment, Aurora grew serious. Why do you hide in this castle? She asked. Why do you stay away from people? The king looked at her, and for the first time, he wondered if he could tell her the truth. I have been hurt, he said carefully. I have loved and lost. I have made mistakes that brought sorrow to others. I thought it was safer to stay alone, to protect those around me from the darkness I carry. Aurora's eyes softened. But don't you want a friend? Don't you want to be happy? He paused, his gaze drifting to the window where moonlight painted the floor in silver. I thought I did not, he said. But perhaps I am wrong. Her small hand reached across the table. Maybe all you need is someone brave enough to care. Sometimes just one person can change everything. The king felt something stir deep within him. It was fragile, trembling, dangerous, yet it was alive. For the first time in centuries, he felt a flicker of hope. But the castle was not idle. The curse, ancient and relentless, had fully sensed the light in the king's heart and the courage in the little human. Shadows lengthened and shifted along the walls, forming shapes that were almost human. Cold whispers slithered across the floor. The curse had been bound for centuries, yet it now awakened with hunger, drawn to the stirrings of emotion that dared to pierce the king's solitude. Aurora noticed the sudden chill. What is that sound?" she asked, her brow furrowed. "Nothing," he said quickly, though his hand brushed the edge of the table, ready to act. "Just the wind." The shadows twisted, and the candlelight flickered violently. From the darkest corner of the hall, a form began to emerge. A ghostly figure, pale and ethereal, eyes burning with sorrow and fury, stepped into the moonlight. The king's breath caught. This was the curse, the memory of love betrayed, the darkness of centuries, and it had come for them. Aurora looked up at him, her eyes wide but calm. "Who is it?" she asked, sensing danger but not fully understanding. He stood slowly, placing himself between her and the figure. "It is the past," he said quietly, his voice steady despite the unease rising in his chest. "And it is not pleased to see us, or you." The ghost moved closer, its form shimmering like mist. "You dared to feel again, my king," it hissed, a voice that echoed with centuries of grief. "You dared to let warmth into your cold heart, and now you will pay the price." Aurora took a small step forward. "Why are you so sad?" she asked. "Why are you so angry? Can't you be happy again?" The king's eyes widened in shock. No one had ever spoken to the curse like that before. Aurora's simple courage and compassion pierced the darkness in a way centuries of power had not. You dare?" the ghost whispered, its voice trembling. "Yes," Aurora said simply. "I dare. Because I believe you can be happy too, but only if you let go of anger." The king felt the room shift around him. Shadows recoiled, candle flames danced higher, and the curse wavered. Aurora's light, her innocence, her courage, her unwavering hope was beginning to challenge centuries of sorrow and rage. The king took a deep breath. He had faced armies, storms, and betrayal. He had survived centuries of solitude. Yet nothing had prepared him for this. The fragile power of a small human girl daring to bring light to a world of darkness. The curse recoiled, and for a brief moment, silence returned to the hall. Aurora looked up at the king and smiled, unaware of how close danger had come. "See? Kindness can change things," she said, her voice warm and fearless. The king knelt slightly, meeting her gaze. "You are remarkable," he admitted softly. "And perhaps you have reminded me what it feels like to hope." Yet as Aurora's smile lingered, the faintest echo of a whisper slithered along the walls, a promise that the curse was not gone, only held at bay. The night was far from over, and the castle still harbored shadows that would not be silenced so easily. Aurora left the hall that night with the king's quiet promise that they would share another meal, another story, another moment of light. But as she skipped down the path to her home, the king's eyes lingered on the shadows. Aware that the awakening had only begun, the castle breathed around him, ancient stones alive with power and memory. The vampire king had felt warmth again, he had glimpsed hope, and he had learned that courage, even in a small human, could challenge the deepest darkness. But the curse waited, and it would not rest until it had tested him, and the little girl who dared to bring light to the heart of a vampire king. The castle slept uneasily under the full moon, its spires casting long shadows across the forest. Inside, the halls were quiet, but the air carried a tension the vampire king had not felt in centuries. The curse, awakened by the little girl's courage and the stirrings of his own fragile hope, prowled the corners of the castle, whispering with cold hunger. It was patient, relentless, and it would not rest until the darkness within him was tested fully. The king stood in the grand hall, his red eyes fixed on the flickering shadows. Aurora had gone home for the night, her presence lingering like sunlight in the otherwise dark castle. For the first time in centuries, he felt both warmth and fear at the same time, a fragile hope he had never dared to hold. He knew the curse had sensed it. It would come. And when it did, it would demand more than just courage. It would demand everything he had ever feared to face. A sudden gust of cold air swept through the hall. Candle flames bent, shadows stretched unnaturally, and a voice thin as mist hissed from the darkest corner. "You dared to hope," it whispered. "You dared to feel. And now you must pay." The king's hand brushed the hilt of the ancient sword he carried at his side. Centuries of battles, bloodshed, and wars had taught him fear, patience, and strategy. Yet this was unlike any enemy he had faced. The curse was not just a spirit. It was the embodiment of his sorrow, his regrets, and the love he had lost long ago. It was the darkness inside himself, made real, and it had come alive in the moonlight. From the shadows, a figure began to form. Pale and ethereal, with eyes burning like dying embers, it stepped fully into the hall. The features were unmistakable, a ghostly echo of the woman he had loved centuries ago, twisted by rage, sorrow, and betrayal. "Why are you here?" the king demanded, his voice steady but tight with emotion. "What do you want from me?" The ghost's gaze pierced him. "You dared to feel again," she said. "You dared to let warmth into your cold heart, and now the light you welcomed will be taken from you. You will not escape the consequences of your own hope." The king clenched his fists. He had feared this day for centuries, yet he realized something he had not expected. He no longer stood alone. He could have ignored the light, dismissed the courage of the little human girl, but he had chosen to embrace it, and that choice had awakened not just the curse, but also something deeper within him, something strong enough to fight back. "You may think I am weak," he said, voice firm. "But I have lived through centuries of darkness. I have faced armies, betrayal, and death itself. I will not allow my heart to be ruled by fear." The ghost moved closer, the shadows twisting around her like black flames. "Then show me," she whispered. "Show me if your heart is worthy of light, or if it is doomed to remain in darkness forever." The king took a deep breath, centering himself. The castle seemed to pulse around him, ancient stones alive with memory and power. He felt the warmth of Aurora's courage again, faint but persistent, like a guiding star in the endless night. "You will not harm her," he said firmly, thinking of the small, fearless girl who had dared to reach into his life. "She is innocent. She has nothing to do with this." The ghost laughed, a sound like ice cracking on a frozen lake. "Innocence does not protect against the past, nor against the choices you have made. If you wish to keep her safe, then you must face what you have long avoided, yourself." The hall grew colder, shadows slithered along the walls, rising toward the ceiling, forming shapes that looked like screaming faces. The king felt the weight of his own sorrow, the failures, betrayals, and lost love pressing down on him like stone. Yet in that pressure, he also felt the stirrings of something new. Courage born not from swords or power, but from love and hope, the same qualities Aurora had shown him. "You will not win," he said aloud, not to the ghost but to the darkness inside him. "Not tonight. Not while there is courage, hope, or light left in me. The ghost surged forward, a wave of icy power that threatened to sweep him off his feet. But the king stood firm, raising his hands. The shadows recoiled slightly at his defiance, as if surprised by the strength of a heart that had dared to hope again. From the corner of the hall, a faint glow appeared. Aurora's courage. Her belief in kindness and hope seemed to seep through the walls of the castle, faint but persistent. It was not the force of armies or magic. It was something far older and stronger. Pure, unshakable faith in the good of the world, the power of courage to change even the darkest heart. The ghost paused, sensing the light. Her fury faltered, replaced by confusion and sorrow. You cannot fight this," she whispered. "It is not possible." "You are wrong," the king said, his voice ringing like a bell. "It is possible, because I will not let fear rule me. I will not let sorrow destroy what little light remains in my heart." With that, he stepped forward. Shadows screamed and twisted around him, but he did not flinch. He faced the ghost directly, his gaze steady, his heart open, and in that moment, something incredible happened. The light within him, the warmth Aurora had ignited, shone brighter than the darkness around him. The ghost's form wavered, her anger faltering under the power of his newfound courage. "No, this cannot be," the ghost whispered. "I am the darkness that rules him. I am the pain he has carried for centuries. How can light touch him?" "Because I choose it," the king said simply. "Because I choose life, hope, and courage over despair, and because I choose to protect those who bring light to my world." The ghost screamed, a sound that shook the walls of the castle. Shadows twisted and writhed, but the king's courage held firm. Slowly the ghost's form began to fade, the anger in her eyes softening into something like sorrow. The curse that had haunted him for centuries was weakening, undone not by violence, but by the power of hope, love, and forgiveness. As the last shadow vanished, the hall grew still. The candles burned steadily, their flames calm and unwavering. The cold air lifted, replaced by a faint warmth, the smell of roses, and the soft echo of life. The king stood alone, yet he did not feel the weight of centuries pressing down. For the first time in centuries, he felt light, alive, and free. Aurora appeared at the doorway, her eyes wide with wonder. It's gone," she said softly. "The shadows, they're gone." The king looked at her and smiled, a rare, genuine smile that lit his pale features. "Thanks to you," he said quietly. "Your courage, your kindness, reminded me of what I have lost and what I can still find." Aurora stepped forward, her small hand reaching for his. "See? I told you. Even the darkest things can change if someone brave enough believes in light." The king knelt slightly to meet her gaze. "You have given me more than hope," he said. "You have given me a chance to feel again, to trust, to love, in the smallest, simplest way." Aurora's smile widened. "I'm happy. And I think you're happy too." He nodded. "I am, because the darkness has passed and light has returned, but I have learned that it is fragile and it must be protected." The little girl's eyes sparkled. "Then I will help you protect it. We can be brave together." For the first time in centuries, the vampire king laughed. A low, melodic sound that echoed through the hall. The castle seemed to respond, walls creaking and groaning like a living thing. Moonlight poured through the windows, casting silver patterns across the floor. He had faced his deepest darkness and survived, and it was not by swords or strength, but by the courage of a small human heart. He realized as he watched Aurora that life could be different. Love could be different. It would not erase the pain of the past, but it could illuminate the path forward. The shadows might return someday, they always did, but now he had the light to face them. Aurora yawned and stretched, her small frame tired but happy. "I should go home now," she said, "but can we have dinner again tomorrow?" The king's red eyes softened. "Yes," he said. "Tomorrow and every day after that, if you wish. The castle lot will not feel so dark when you are here." She smiled, then skipped down the path to her village, her golden curls bouncing, her laughter ringing in the night. The king watched her go, his heart lighter, freer, and full of something he had almost forgotten: hope. He turned back to the hall, now calm and quiet, the curse banished for the first time in centuries. But he knew this was only the beginning. The darkness within him might return someday, the shadows might rise again, but he would face them with courage, guided by the light of those who dared to care. And somewhere, in the depth of the castle, the stones themselves seemed to hum with approval, the walls holding the memory of a vampire king who had learned that even the darkest heart could be touched by light. The night passed quietly, peaceful for the first time in centuries. The king stood by the window, looking out at the silvered forest. He felt a promise rising within him, a promise to protect the light, to cherish the hope, and to never again let sorrow rule his heart. The moon hung high, a silent witness to his transformation, and though the night was still, the castle no longer felt empty. Somewhere, deep inside, a small warmth glowed, a reminder that love, hope, and courage could awaken even the most frozen heart. The vampire king had been changed, the darkness had tested him, but in the end, he had chosen light. And so, the castle slept peacefully under the silver glow of the moon, awaiting the dawn, and the little girl who had dared to bring hope to a vampire king's heart.